Did I fall asleep in this exact spot making videos last night? Yes. Did I wake up in the same clothes that I was wearing in the videos from last night? Yes. But that's not important. It's Taco Tuesday. Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is out. Let's talk about customizing your origin. I was not going to make this video originally because I've already covered it when it came out of the Adventures League, but there may have been some skeptics. Some people thought that it was Adventure League only and not this. This is the final published product in the book. We could talk about it. So let's talk about that. This is sort of a sister video to the Custom Lineage, which is obviously, as I kind of expected, a very polarizing topic. People seem to love it or hate it. And I'll just use this at the start here, folks. These are optional rules. If you don't like them, don't use them. End of story, right? There's nothing to complain about. If you're like, this is so stupid, I hate it, cool. Don't use it. And that's it. That's the whole thing. Okay? If you like it, great, use it. I think, again, like I said in that video, its best spot is for if you want to make a homebrew race and you're worried about keeping it within the confines of what's balanced, that's a great way. Using a feat and choosing things like Magic Initiate or otherwise, you can replicate a lot of class or race features for different old races from other editions or something you're trying to replicate in the game. Use the Custom Lineage system. It's balanced enough that Wizards put it into a book as an option for you. You can use that to try and replicate your own race if you don't feel comfortable homebrewing something from scratch. So anyway, that conversation is done. Last I'm going to talk on it. Let's talk about customizing your origin. This is, again, we've heard about this. This is if you want to tweak some aspects of your race without going full Custom Lineage. Someone also brought up, I'll say in the Custom Lineage, you can be a small elf now. So you could basically be like a Santa's helper style elf, which is funny to me. But it basically says here at the start, you choose a race at level 1. You choose ability scores, race, class, and background, and it gives you a set of things. So if you want to customize that, and realistically, people have been doing this the whole time. And this is something that Wizards of the Coast said, and I think I want to bring it back in to talk about this. Certain folks out there, and it's not everybody, but certain people, especially newer players and newer DMs, don't necessarily feel comfortable allowing like this level of customizability we're going to talk about unless it's sort of put in print by Wizards of the Coast, because then in some people's minds that makes it okay or like it is allowed. So they put in stuff in here and they've admitted it in interviews that people have been doing since the start of Dungeons & Dragons, and definitely since the start of 5th edition, altering, changing, tweaking racial features and races and customizability options. But some people don't feel comfortable doing that until it's put down on paper that you can. So this is sort of Wizards saying, hey, those of you who've been doing what you're doing, cool, keep doing what you're doing. But those of you who've been nervous about doing it, look, here's an option if you want to. And that's, again, it's optional. You don't like it, don't use it. So it's the ability score swaps, okay? Pretty specific. Whatever or pretty simple, rather simplistic. Whatever your race gives you for ability scores, swap them. They're free. You can swap them. That's what this is saying. If you want to use this. So if you are a wood elf, that gives you a +2 dexterity, and the subrace of wood elf gives you a +1 wisdom. You now, per this rule, if you would like to use it, can swap those into anything. The only caveat is you can't put them all into the same ability score. So you could now be a wood elf with a +2 strength and a +1 charisma. The only thing you can't do is put +2 strength, +1 strength to add a +3. Obviously, we talked about how you can get around that and sort of do that using the Custom Lineage, but that's how that works. So that's what it is, right? So if you are a half elf and you get a +2 to charisma and a +1 to 2 other stats, you can now make that +2 charisma a +2 to anything else. If you are a mountain dwarf who gets a +2 to strength and a +2 to constitution, you can now get a +2 in any 2 things that you want. So this just allows you to, and I've kind of felt this way for a long time myself, it sort of allows the race to be a cosmetic choice that you want to, and it might be because of heritage, because of how they're set up in your homebrew world. Maybe in your world, you know, dwarves have a southern accent and you're really good at a southern accent, but you didn't want to play a dwarf because you were hard-coded in your head. As someone who comes from a min-maxi background, I completely understand this. Hard-coded in your head to say, well, like a dwarf doesn't fit the bard build I want to make because a dwarf gives me constitution and strength. Well, now I can swap that and maybe have dexterity and charisma, right? That's what this is. And I think the part that a lot of people are focusing on is the swappable ability scores. I think the more interesting part is you coming up with an interesting way of justifying why your ability scores are different in your backstory. Now, you don't necessarily have to do that, right? This is a hard-coded ability score feature that you're getting, but I think it could be interesting. If all mountain dwarves are +2 strength, +2 constitution, what made you different? What did you do? What happened in your life? What things did you ignore and aspects did you take on to get a +2 dexterity, +2 charisma? That could be a really fun roleplay exercise, character building exercise, conversations with your DM where you separated from the dwarves at birth and you were raised by Fae and that's why you have charisma. I don't know. I think that could be fun. So that's basically what it says. They still can't exceed 20, right? The maximum is 20. You can't add them all together, but that explains it, right? So yes, in theory, if you are a pure numbers player, half-elf and mountain dwarf are the two most powerful options because they give you the most, they give you 4 points to distribute amongst ability scores as opposed to 3 like everyone else, right? Things like a Triton give you +1 to strength, constitution, and charisma. You now can have a +1 to 3 other stats if you want. So it just depends on the race. You can swap them out. Unfortunately, some races, so my example of using Kobold for Custom Lineage, Kobolds only get a +2 to dexterity. They don't get a plus to any other ability score. So in my mind, that's why it made more sense to be a Kobold using the Custom Lineage, because I can ignore some of the, in my mind, poor design choices in that race. Then we have languages, right? You usually know Common and another language. They say Halflings typically know Common and Halfling. Maybe your Halfling was raised by Elves, so they know Common and Elvish. And they give you a list of customizable languages right here to use. Abyssal, Celestial, Common, Deep Speech, Draconic, Dwarvish, Elvish, Giant, Gnomish, Goblin, Halfling, Infernal, Orc, Primordial, Sylvan, or Undercommon. These are the pretty standard races. There are weird other unique languages out there, right? Like you can't learn Druidic because Druidic is a secret language of the Druids. You can't learn Thieves' Cant. Now you could work with your DM and say maybe that is the language that you know because you were raised by Druids and they taught you their secret language, or you were raised in a den of thieves, so you knew Thieves' Cant, you know Common and Thieves' Cant. You don't actually know Elvish even though you're an elf. Maybe you were raised by blink dogs and you speak the super rare language of blink dog, a language that only they speak, or giant owl, other weird, unique languages that other people don't talk about. They're not designed to be standard races or standard language for you to choose, but with enough character development, and these, again, these are all free. Feel free to use these as character hooks and interesting character concepts. It could be really cool to be raised by giant elk and you speak the giant elk language. It's probably super specific to your character, but if that's the roleplay exercise you want to do, go for it. And then lastly, probably the other more important one that everybody kind of has also had issues with, and we'll talk about it, is proficiencies in skills or other things. So it basically says, I should also state, this is only for races, not for classes. So if you get a race that gives you a skill, you can directly swap that skill for another skill. For example, you are an elf, you get proficiency in perception. You don't want proficiency in perception. I don't know why you would choose that, but you want proficiency in acrobatics. You swap that, right? This, I think, is probably going to see more use in races that get multiple ability score or multiple skill proficiencies, right? Like a Tabaxi, I think, gets like acrobatics and perception, or persuasion and perception, or something. Whatever Tabaxi get 2 languages. You could swap those languages out for different, or I'm sorry, keep saying languages. You could swap those skills out for different skills. Then we also see you can swap armor proficiency for a simple or martial weapon proficiency or a tool. A simple weapon can be swapped for a simple weapon or a tool. A martial weapon can be swapped for a simple or martial weapon or a tool. or a tool can be swapped for a tool or simple weapon. So there are a couple of things you can probably see right out the gate. One of the best examples I can think of are, again, dwarves and elves. Most elven sub-races give you proficiency in a series of weapons. For example, a high elf gets you proficiency in longbow, longsword, shortbow, shortsword. If you are going to be a high elf fighter, your fighter's class gives you proficiency in all martial weapons. Having those 4 martial weapons from your race are redundant and therefore kind of pointless because you're already going to get all of them. So, per this, 4 martial weapons, we don't need to, in this fighter example, need any martial weapons. We have proficiency in all weapons, but we don't have proficiency in tools. We could therefore exchange our proficiency in longbow, longsword, shortbow, shortsword for 4 tools. We could now have proficiency in thieves' tools, poisoner's kit, herbalism kit, and cartographer tools. So now we have a very skillful race in this, and we're level 1 by doing this. So that's a good example, is where you want to swap things because, and I'm sure you all have encountered this, where you happen to pick a race that gives you either skills, probably not so much on the skill side, but definitely like armor, tool, or weapon proficiencies. Let's say you have, you pick a race that gives you, I don't think there's a lot of races that give you tool proficiencies. I think dwarves do, actually. I think dwarves give you proficiency in a couple of choices of tools. So let's say whatever class you happen to pick gives you proficiency in tools, and so does your dwarven race. You could swap it for a different tool or maybe a simple weapon, right? Simple weapons could be swapped for, again, a tool as well. Another example would be dwarves, for example. I have a player in my regular Tuesday night streams. He is a dwarf, a mounted dwarf, no less, mountain dwarf barbarian. Okay, so barbarian gives you light and medium armor, shields, and all simple and martial weapons, right? As a mountain dwarf, he gets proficiency in light armor, medium armor, and the 5 dwarven racial weapons, which are like a great axe, battle hammer, and so on. He doesn't need those 5 proficiencies in those weapons or those 2 armor proficiencies. So he could, in theory, trade those away and get 7 tool proficiencies. And his character could be, this is, again, we're 100 episodes into this campaign, so I doubt he's going to do that now. But that's a really cool thing to think about at character creation. And it lets you, I think the main purpose of this is to remove those redundancies where you're like, well, I really want to play a dwarf and I really want to play this subrace or this class, but it sucks because it's redundant. I want to play a dwarf fighter. Well, my armor proficiencies and my weapon proficiencies I get from being a dwarf are pointless to me. That sucks. That's a whole aspect of my character that I don't get to really use. It's just kind of thrown to the side. And this sort of fixes that by allowing you to swap and change. There are certain races that give proficiency with a specific weapon. Certain classes give proficiency with a specific weapon, so that could be an option for you to change it out. So I think the intention of this is to basically have you not have a choice you make invalidate another aspect of a given race that you choose. It also might encourage you to play a different race you wouldn't want to play normally, because you'd be like, oh, well, I would really love it if I could have proficiency in thieves' tools and herbalism kit. Oh, well, maybe I'll try out an elf because I can swap out the proficiencies and get those, you know? And there's no reason you need to swap all of them, right? For example, if you happen to be a rogue, an elf rogue, right? Rogues get proficiency, I think, with short bows and long swords. You could swap out your elven proficiency with short bow and long sword for 2 tools and still have the longbow proficiency from elf. And that's how that's, I think, originally designed to be done. So that's my thought on this. I think this is a good idea. I think it works well. And I think, as I've stated at the beginning, folks, it's an option. Just don't use it if you don't like it. End of story. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on the customizing your origin. This is, again, utilizing the existing races, but tweaking them a little bit further. There's a little bit more in here about like, you know, how you could change personality aspects of your character, but that's mostly just backstory stuff. So let me know your thoughts. There's a little section here too about like changing your subclass and changing out a skill proficiency. I don't think those are super necessary, but if you want to let me cover those or want me to cover those, just let me know and I will. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.